utilizes cost efficiencies, and equally important is being responsive to the town's financial needs. I will say that this budget, I believe, ensures the success for our students. This is a slide that you saw back when Principal Sherman gave her testing report on Smarter Balance. It certainly shows the increase and the continuous improvement of our students across all of our grades that are tested, grades 3 through 6, in terms of math and language arts, and where they stand, not just in their local DIRG, but also in all of Connecticut, in the top 10%. And also, it's more than just comparing to other towns, it's also about the growth that students are making from one year to the next in those important areas. So this budget does certainly support all of that. And again, I bring to you this operating budget proposal, which is 0.76%. And you might ask, just for just one last thought here, where does that compare to other budgets in the past? On the right-hand side, the 0.76% is for FY21, starting in July. You'll see the last 10 years of budget increases that have taken place for the Woodbridge Board of Education Beecher Road School. And also you will see here, and this is a slide I spoke about a little while ago, how do we work in partnership with our town, who is very supportive and has been very supportive over the years. These particular this bar graph shows on the left the revenue that comes directly to the town from our special education excess cost grant, where money is funneled right back to the town, and that's what shows over the last 10 years. You will see also in the middle bar, this is the money that has been returned to the town over the last 10 years when we've had a year where we had a budget surplus. And then likewise on the right-hand side, when we've had and experienced budget issues, we had unanticipated special education needs or other kinds of needs, this is the supplemental appropriation total that the town has given to us when we needed that. So again, I come to you, this is the final slide of the presentation, with this budget proposal of 0.76% for the school year 2020-2021.
So before we discuss, we just need a motion to open it for discussion. So, the motion to approve the budget.
I move that we approve the superintendent's 2020-2021 budget as presented.
Is there a second?
Wait, would we?
That's a motion to approve? Or
It's a motion to approve, and then we discuss.
It seems like it's backwards, right?
No, you have to have a motion on the table to
in
discuss the
order to
motion.
discuss.
You can change it, you can amend it, you can do anything, but there's got to be a motion to discuss.
At the second time, can you say that's when we want discussion, or you second it and then you? Well, someone's got to second it.
It's got to be a motion on the table to discuss. So we make a motion, we second it, then we discuss it,
Okay.
and then if we change it, you can amend the motion and we change it. But
I'll second the motion.
okay, discussion.
So I have a clarification question. So over the last 4 years, there's you have a slide in there where you show our special education spending over the last 4 years, and it shows budgeted versus actual. I think it's like maybe 8 slides back or something like that.
So you're looking at the budget book, right?
I'm looking at your presentation. Probably matches your budget book.
Is it the outplacement cost one or the?
It might be out. I can tell you what page it is.
Right here.
Yes, it's the red and blue graph.
Yeah.
Outplacement cost.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to sit here.
This one right here?
Yeah. Yes, that one right there. So, over the last 4
You're
years.
looking at a different
Yeah,
slide.
I know.
Okay.
I was scrolling to find it,
Okay.
and then
I just want to make sure.
she showed it to me. I said, good enough. So over the last 4 years, we've had roughly $200,000 of unaccounted, over our budget for outplacement. And I know that we had a benefit this year due to the graduation of someone or some incident that provided us a benefit.
Well, there's a lot of things that are going into the savings. A lot is keeping students here, work by the administration to bring students back, making sure that we're paying for students who actually live here, and then there are there's always some transition in and out. Could be moving in and out, could be graduating students, so there's a variety of factors to that.
So most importantly, I want to talk about capacity we built in the school. And if we were to have, I guess this is outplacement costs that are over budget, but if we were to have another special education, what kind of capacity did we build into the school is kind of what I'm getting at. So we've said that we built capacity in so we can bring someone back. Have we maxed out our capacity with bringing that individual back? And if any new special ed students enter the school, will we immediately have an outplacement cost? I know we have to budget for what we know, but is everybody redlined with the budget you proposed?
I think my best answer to that is we have built capacity for the students who are here, for the and it's always something in transition because students come and go, move in and out. Students can also move in and out of a program based upon how we're able to work with their goals and objectives. A student may move in from out of district. And we have room for them. But one of the things we're trying to do with this budget is to add a teacher so we can make sure we continue to have the slots available or the room available for additional students. I'm not sure. Is that?
I think you're answering my question as well as you can, I guess.
I have a related point that I've made at our two previous meetings, and I'd like to share again. We have almost $500,000 in unused special ed funds, right? And so how it works for this year is that we're applying those funds to cover other expenses. And should this budget be approved, and then a couple weeks later, a family moves in, right, then we will have to go to the town to seek a supplemental appropriation. And so I guess I would ask us as a group whether we could discuss, like have a real discussion around what is the best way to address the situations where we do have the funds available. And this would be in conjunction with the town because we know that the fluctuation in special ed funding, it can be quite significant. It just so happens that right now we have unused funds, but should we, is the question, I mean, I'm not going to prescribe how we use the funds, but for example, should we set aside some of these special ed funds that would in another year be used for special ed so that in the future, should a family move in, they have significant needs, we have these funds available for them. Anyway, my point is just, it's a question as to whether we should have this discussion around what is the best approach.
So the only thing I would say to that is the whole point of us budgeting for what we know, while right now you're saying we have a surplus, but in a year when we think we might have someone, are we going to budget more money into the budget to accommodate for, I mean, it just gets us into where you're looking at it one side of the equation. For many years, the special ed budget has gone up and up and up. We have one sort of time period when it hasn't gone up. And I think it would be, if we start getting into the habit of setting money aside for special ed, then we're going to be increasing our budget and having sort of a surplus of funds sitting in a separate account that I'm not sure the town would want us to carry a surplus. In some ways, the town does carry a surplus, right? I mean, if you look at the slide, the excess cost that comes from the state to pay for the offset on special ed doesn't come to us, right? We budget for what we have, we go to the town, and everything is paid by the town. The town then receives revenue for some of that, and it offsets the town's cost, but it doesn't come back to us. So over the years, if you look, the town has gotten $1 million in excess funds from the state, which goes into their funds. And in addition to that, over the years, we have given them back $600,000 in unused special ed funds when we had surpluses. And so the times that we've had deficits has equaled 467. So if you look at the town's kind of fund balance, for us doing it the way we've been doing it forever, the town has made up on the positive side, not on the negative side, for special ed funding.
I think that's that 3-bar graph that you were showing, right? Yeah. And I did notice that when Bob, it was the first time I actually got that when I looked at that if you add those first 2 columns together and subtract the 3rd column, then you end up with a net positive, which is essentially what that, if you were running a balance since 2009, to your point, that's that balance that you're talking about specifically there, right? So currently, we have a balance in that hypothetical account, fictional account.
So just to make sure I'm understanding right, so we're in the FY20 year right now from, the 1920 year. That's money we have right now. If let's say we had $100,000 at the end of the year left that we did not spend in special education because of whatever the circumstances were, in a sense, the town and the board leaders have had some informal conversations about one way to take a look at planning for the future is to say we're going to take that $100,000 we didn't spend this year and put it in a checking account and say that's our money to it's our rainy day account for students who we don't know who are going to enter the school or enter the district and need special education assistance out of district. We've also talked about the reality that if that's the only money that we have to count on, and Mr. Gilbert enters the district and has 3 students who are outplaced, we don't have enough money for those 3 students. I think the other thing I want to make sure we're clear on is that the money that we're talking about for next year is not actual dollars that we have we don't have $466,000 in our pocket to do whatever we want with. But if we were to say we were going to take $100,000 and put it in a checking account and still maintain a 0.76% increase, we would actually have to come up with $100,000 more of cuts in order to do that. Does that make sense? Do people understand that concept?
Yep.
So I want to make sure that at least that's my, and I may be missing some of the metrics of that, but I think we have what we have. We've had some discussions about, not going with a budget for what you know concept and doing something a little different. It's very risky because what happens is when you have to spend $450,000 of Mr. Gilbert's 3 kids coming in the district, that $450,000 would then have to impact that school year all 850 students in the district. So that's what the conversations we've had. And I don't know, Joyce, if I'm missing a little bit there.
And I'm not suggesting that if we were to put money aside, that would be the only funds available to cover future families moving in with needs. I think it just feels funny that we would use the surplus, like the surplus we enjoy, but the bill the town gets. Right?
But we don't have a surplus.
It's not a surplus. It's a
surplus.
Yeah,
Well, it's not a surplus, but unused funds.
No, it's actually not money yet.
If you look
What
at
it is, it's
2009,
money that we are not going to have to spend
that way.
because we don't have the. And actually, if you turn it around, if you take a look at this chart, you'll see that there were other years where actually the reverse happened. We were spending $500,000 on outplacements, and the next year, because of what we knew moved in and what we knew, we had a budget for what we knew, moved from $500,000 up to $800,000. So that was a bad news time. We have a good news time this time based on a couple of different reasons. So, but it's not money that we have to play with right now. It's not our money to choose how do we use it at this point. Does that make sense? I mean,
So I might comment that has, that's an issue of the relationship between the town and the school, and I think that it's very good to have the flexibility to talk to the town and work out the differences, and it's good for the school in the sense that you can plan under that basis, whereas you can't plan if you don't know if you have a relationship where you can accommodate any differences that arise. I want to ask one question though, with regard to this the cost of in-placement versus outplacement. It's a major portion of how the budget is being accommodated here, and I appreciate the significant costs that you can recoup by increasing the in-placement. And there's a couple goals that we want to accomplish in doing that. One is achieving the education goals of the in-place students. I'm fairly confident that the people we'll hire will work toward that goal. But I invite you to comment if you have any thoughts or concerns about making sure that those in-place students are getting the education they need here compared to what they'd get.
Say in-place students, are you tell me, when you say in-place?
I mean the students who are, the students who are placed in Beecher as opposed to being sent to outplaced services. That's what I mean by in-place students.
Okay.
And then, obviously, the outplacement eliminates costs to other students of in-place students, in the sense that students that are sent away, part of the reason that they're sent away is because they're difficult to manage for the other students around.
We've done that's correct. And we've done everything possible in the least restrictive environment philosophy to keep them here. And when we know we've exhausted all possibilities, then
Yes.
we have to choose that as the option, right?
Yeah. The increased capacity to in-place the students, I'm just wondering, so all of the budgetary decisions we make actually have consequences in terms of what you do here, obviously. And one of the consequences that isn't measured in cost, in dollars, is the increased cost of in-placement students compared to the other students. And I'm wondering, can you
Sure.
explain how that is minimized or eliminated?
I think
That's my question.
if I'm reading that, I think what you're saying is, what's the impact on the entire school population?
Exactly.
I think is what you're saying. And I think there was a couple of public comments, I think, that were also that I can kind of weave into that. I mean, so we do know we are facing in education, not at Beecher, but at Beecher as well, everywhere, a change in dynamics of what we are faced to meet the needs of in terms of academics, but in behavioral and everything else in between. So I think what we're doing for capacity building, and we're not there yet, we're still on a continuum, is to make sure we have the programs available so when a student is not working in the classroom, there is a place for them to be. So we want to see the impact for that student in a positive way. We also want to see a positive impact for all the students. Now, let me also say that the board this summer, all of you agreed on, and we will do this in the beginning in the new year. We wanted to make sure we had an ad hoc committee looking at environment, classroom safety, however, whatever we want to name that. And so I think these are some of the conversations that will come out in that, and I think are important because it's an impact for everybody. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, Jeff, but I think what we're trying to do with these program rooms are to make sure, and these are places we haven't had before in terms of really being able to address students who have needs, and that's how we're trying to get at that and get under the hood of that.
Can I just ask as a clarification? It's not necessarily that the difference in cost is because they're staying here so much as they may have moved or their families may have moved. So the $500,000 difference may not actually have to do with the change in our services.
Yeah, it's a combination of all
Right.
this. So
They
it
might
So
might
be
be,
we're talking
graduated
about this
out.
as if it were a direct causal
Right.
link of we're doing this new thing and therefore it's $500,000 less.
There's a variety of impacts that have caused that $466,000 to be what it is, and anything from a student moving in or out of the district, and since we're not talking about a lot of numbers here, so we try to be confidential and not be identifiable, but it's the student who's moving in the district or out. It's the student who may be graduating from the 6th grade and now is Amity's. It's the students who we have worked with the family and determined that we are not responsible for paying for their education, or bringing a student back from a costly outplacement, or programs that we've developed that are keeping students here as opposed to sending a student out. I can tell you that and Cheryl could do a better job than I could, but there are several students who are trying to meet the needs in a least restrictive environment philosophy, that if we didn't have these rooms, they would not be able to stay here at Beecher for their own benefit, and then that 466 would be 266 of savings or something like that.
Yeah, and I think it's important to clarify that the behavioral issues that had been discussed earlier were not necessarily special ed related, right?
Right.
It seemed like it was general ed.
Actually, and that's true. I mean, yeah. So, and yes, that's true.
Is it in regards to the behavior issues that were spoken about earlier? Do we have any kind of funding in this budget? How do we know that as a board we're approving a budget that has required funding to address any of those issues if required? Or could that be an additional cost to the town if after this ad hoc committee we figure out X, Y, and Z? I mean, you probably know some things that we could do already that would make it a safer environment, for the teachers, for the other students. And do we have monies in here already earmarked that you know about that are specifically targeting that goal?
So first of all, just thinking back to one of the comments, we don't have money in here to put cameras on all of our buses, and that's actually a bigger policy and philosophical question that the board would want to wrestle with. But so that there's a potential or a possibility there. We also look at professional learning and professional development. We have a committed group of administrators and teachers together who form our professional development committee. And some of our work this year, every year probably, in some way, shape, or form, has some implications for climate, safety, behavior. We've been talking recently about a couple of workshops, actually, at least one in particular, that we think it may be a ripe time to send a team to, because this is an area that is front and center for us. So professional development funds is one way, and using some of our professional development money to send staff and then to bring back either ideas, structures, solutions to help. We could always go to the town too, but I mean the town asks us to work within the parameters of our own budget. So
correct, and that's what we're trying to avoid, make sure that we don't need to go back to the town, and that we have, enough money in there to address these issues, that teachers and students are facing.
Yeah, I had a similar question to that, because it seems like some of the capacity building we've been talking about is about building capacity with regard to special ed, but a lot of the things we've been hearing about today and what we've been hearing about over the past few months has to do with behavior in general ed. And so I was wondering the same thing, like to what extent do we have the resources and the capacity, or at least the planning for capacity building around addressing some of these general ed concerns that we have? How confident do you feel in our ability to continue to make progress in that area and have any resources to do it?
Sure. So for the greater school population, we've talked about responsive classroom. We've talked about the fact that responsive classroom has a lot of different components to that. Responsive classroom is for the general population. It's not for the students who have significant needs, for have behavior plans and things like that. Shooting off of responsive classroom, we actually, I know it was mentioned that November 4th there was an issue on the bus, but I think since November 4th we've had a peaceful bus initiative. You may have heard it from your own children, possibly, maybe not, but we, in terms of getting on the bus, staff members have been involved with this. Actually, I would probably go to my friends over here to have a little more explanation as to what we're doing. But so we have some things in place. It doesn't mean that we feel like we have the be-all, end-all. And I think, I honestly think that actually the task force that we probably set up, which will have a stakeholder group, will be very beneficial for us to take an introspective look at this area, because folks are right. I've heard several of you around the table say, it's not just a segment of the population. We're feeling like there's a lot of this and a lot of that. So while I am very, very confident in the abilities of our collective staff to work together on this, I do think that we're in a process of doing a little soul searching in that. And I think that mechanism of the ad hoc will be actually one way to help us continue to move that forward.
Did the peaceful bus training happen before or after that incident?
After you
The
said.
entire population had it in their rooms before, and then we did a revisit.
No, but the parent that spoke, did that incident happen before or after?
I don't have the date in my.
We did the initial whole school going before.
Oh, so it happened before.
And then we did a revisit after.
After.
Oh, after
After the
that, so,
It was after November 4th.
First page. Other questions for Bob?
I have a question. The town has asked us to come, I guess they have asked all the departments to come in at a 0% increase. And so if we were to come in at a 0% increase, I would just ask whether we have exhausted every means possible to avoid any staff reduction or programming change that would affect the student body and the teacher population. So, I mean, I leave it to you guys to think about everything that we could possibly do to avoid that situation.
In thinking about that, 80% of our budget is, we know, salary and benefit driven. We also know that beyond that 80%, there's a significant amount of money that goes to maintain this facility in a viable way, to make sure that we don't experience some of the things that we've experienced in the past, whether it's maintenance contracts, whether it's roofing contracts, whatever that might be. There are very few places left to go. I mean, like insurance, we know we have to have an insurance increase this year. We don't exactly know. We have budgeted with the town in collaboration with them, believing that we have the right number. So we've looked at that. If we were to wipe out, I'm going to just say this, if we were to wipe out all of the instructional supply budget, and instructional supplies includes more than making sure that Ms. McDonald has pencils and paper in her room, or Shannon has pocket folders in for the kids. It's library books. It is restocking classroom libraries. But so that number is about $120,000, give or take a few. So if we wiped out instructional supplies and we said, sorry, teachers, figure it out completely. Even though we know teachers spend a lot of money out of their own pockets to make the classrooms work and run, there's $120,000. That's roughly the increase that we have this year. But that would be very significant in a lot of ways. First of all, for the teachers, impacting the kids in instruction in the classroom. So that's an example of, where could we go? I mean, we've already in this budget, basically, we're pretty close to level funding our supplies right now for our kids. And I think most teachers you probably sent out these letters, right? Mrs. Jones, at the beginning of the year or during the summer, here's all the things you need to buy. The kids have to buy stuff already. Families have to buy things already. So that's just one example. I don't know, Al, I hate to put you on the spot. Is there anything, where would we go?
I covered it. It's largely a labor, salaries and benefits are 80%. So when you're looking for $115,000, which is just a little less than 1% of the total budget, any area you go to is going to have pain.
At one point, we have explored things like grounds maintenance, consolidation, finance function consolidation. I'm not saying that we do this. I'm just saying that these points have been raised both by the town and within our task force, the SRO, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess I just want to make sure that we are comfortable with the fact that we have tried every single thing to avoid reducing any staff or changing any programs if we have to come in at zero. So if you're saying, yes, we have done that, then we've done that.
I can say that, just in terms of discussions about groundskeeping and talking with the town, we've said as soon as you are ready to do it, we will give you that business. There has been no movement on the town side to be able to build capacity to do the things that we've said we'd be willing to give them. I mean, none of these things happen quickly, but we have talked to them about IT services. We've talked to them about groundskeeping services. We've said anything that the town wants to bring within to the town that provides the service to the school but is built into the town budget, we'd be happy to do that.
As long as it meets.
As long as it meets the, as long as, but we're not,
Current needs.
but unfortunately, those
In writing.
things are not necessarily happening in the next few months. And we haven't even figured out how much savings that would be.
And one
right?
thing that Bob said to me during another meeting that was important was, we can spend less. So even next year, if one of those things does happen and yield savings, then
Money goes back
we'll
to
have
the
a
town.
surplus. So it
But-
doesn't mean that necessarily just because this is what we vote on. If we can save $30,000 on groundskeeping, then we'll save the $30,000 on groundskeeping.
Yes, I understand
Yeah.
that, but now is the time to see how much we can do so that we don't have to reduce staff, for example.
So
There are people affected today by that.
Yes, exactly.
Sorry.
And so that's why there's urgency around trying to move on as many of these potential opportunities as possible.
in terms of grounds, one of the conversations we've had is, yeah, we can do your grounds. We will need to hire, the town will need to hire someone in order to do it. So they're going to incur a cost. So that's been the last conversation regarding something like a grounds. You know, some of us were hopeful that, you know, there might be someone who's available on the staff of the town, you know,
Because
to
they
do
talked
that kind
about
of thing.
taking one day of the transfer station, right? And then that person would be freed up, and, I mean,
Sure,
I
and
don't
if
know
that
all the
happens, that'd be
details
great.
of what happened since then.
We don't have any, I mean, I don't have and we don't have any control over that scenario, but if that does play out, as you described, we may have an opportunity there. But that, my understanding is that still,
We live under a time
Process.
frame for budget for the town. The town charter says we have to do these things by a certain date. This is sort of the last possible date for us to approve a budget. The truth is that there have been times that something changed between December and when the town voted on it, and we have made adjustments to the budget. And again, my feeling is we will continue to press the town about some of the easier things. It's not a big line item in the budget, but it's certainly something we're trying. You know, getting to this low of a number, and I'll be honest with you, is a fluke. The reality is that we had, you know, an arbitration result that resulted in a 4.89% increase. If we didn't have some of these serendipitous special ed things occur,
It would be a crisis.
we would be in crisis mode. We would be cutting staff in a much larger way to get to zero. I just want to say, I think it's not reasonable for a town to think that education can come in at zero. It's just not how the system works. And as much as we sit there and try to chisel away at 20,000 here and giving pencils out or not giving pencils out, we're a labor-intensive organization. And the thing that we want is our labor to be good, and we want our classroom sizes to be appropriate. And I just think, you know, in some ways, we got lucky that, and it still hurts, but we would never be able to come in with this number if it weren't for some of the special ed changes. And so I'm saying it because next year we will be in a position where we will have the same increases, and the likelihood that we're going to go lower on special ed outplacement, I would put at zero. There is no way we're going to get to a point where we're not outplacing any children at all, and that's pretty much as low as I've seen our outplacement costs since I've been on the Board of Ed. So, you know, I think we're doing our best to get this number in low, and I think that the budget includes some changes that we think are necessary. But I do sort of want it out there that we're just like we did zero in 2014 2014 or 2000, whatever year that was. Those are one-offs, and it's not feasible in the world of education to think that you can continuously come in without making huge detrimental changes to the educational program for the kids.
I think to echo what Joyce was saying, I agree. It would be great to not cut if at all possible. And my question comes to thinking about, I know that we need another school psychologist. I know we need more testing. I know we have higher student needs. But ideally, I think we don't want to cut the social worker as well. It would be nice if we could have both. I don't know, doesn't seem to be an option right now. But I do want to put it on the table that we could consider having a half-time psychologist and maintain the social worker. So, I mean, I know that that's not necessarily ideal for the reason of having a full-time employee and having continuity. But I do think a social worker brings a little bit of a different lens to it. A psychologist is a little more child-centered focused. A social worker is a little bit more community focused. And I know psychologists can do a lot of the same things, but thinking about history that's there, cutting ties with current families and students and whatnot, is another adjustment. So it seems like we could consider not.
Is there room in the time frame that we have that even if we approve this, that you as the administrator have the latitude to move stuff around continuously in this, or once we approve this, then this is the gospel according to?
Technically, we approve a number increase, and within there, the superintendent has the ability to. I mean, he's coming to us with a plan. We're approving this plan, but if there was discussion, I think it is possible. If there was other funds that were available or something freed up, or we got an outsourced contract that somehow resulted in other funds, but unless I'm wrong, but we approve a number that we're going to the town with.
We approve a number. We also send them a budget book that has, I would say, that outlines what the number includes.
Right.
I also think that.
But the town will come back. The town has no line item veto authority. The town just comes
Absolutely.
back
No,
with,
that's
you're
right.
not getting
I do that,
0.76, you're getting 0.4,
That is
0.2,
correct.
0, and then you come back to us with how we get to that.
So we have one more opportunity, or you specifically have an opportunity after town, because the town might say, you know what? Give yourself 2.
Yeah, right. You haven't been to many town budget meetings.
Thanks for coming in, thanks for trying. But, so we'll have one more. I had to break the ice somehow.
So one, just a couple of things. One, and let me say that this has been an extremely painful process, and actually, to tell you the truth, you're right. This process probably will be even more painful next year, based upon what Steve was describing a little bit. If you continue to think about things from a perspective of 0 or close to 0, so the thinking and the concern behind this is not anything to do with the contributions of any person or the person who's given to the organization. Absolutely not. It's not about that. It's about how do we plan for the future? How do we provide continuity for the future? And how do we ensure that that we are ready to take on the mandated things that come through our door that we're not sure of that are going to come through the door? I mean, we can do anything you want, and I don't mean that in a flippant way. We need more psychologist help, number one, and we've talked about it before in our most recent meeting about continuity. If a student's in crisis, and I'm working with them, and I'm only here for the morning, and I'm leaving at 12 noon, the student is still in crisis when I leave at 12:01. There's a lot of overlap. It doesn't mean that one is more important or better or worse than the other. Group and individual counseling is done by both kinds of professionals. Crisis team, taking care of crises, consulting and supporting parents are done by both kinds of jobs. you know, community outreach can be. You know, I mean, school psychologists would advocate for themselves. I have a school psychologist. You know, what do they do? What do school counselors do? There is, you know, there's a lot of similarities. A lot of times the differences are because a district might say, okay, you both have these capabilities. You're going to do this thing, and you're going to do that thing. But in retrospect, what I'm trying to say here, as painful as it is what is best for continuity for the kids. And I will say that if we're trying to emphasize what we're doing for support to staff with students who are in the classrooms, it's also a support to the staff members, the classroom teachers, or whoever is experiencing the emotional outburst at the moment, or whatever that might be. So it's very sobering. It's very painful. I'm trying to present to you what I believe, as much as it's painful to staff, is to what can we do to provide continuity and a fullness to what we have. So it's a painful conversation to have, and it is. And it's painful to the person or persons, and it's just, it's no fun. And it'll be less fun next year, probably.
Yeah. So that I mean, I think is a problem, right? We have so it's painful now, and it's probably going to be more painful next year. So we have a long-term, larger problem here, it seems like. And I'm just thinking about, are there other resources we could be tapping into to support to address some of the problems that we've been talking about today, but particularly around behavior, around needing more resources for special ed? Have we ever looked into things like grants that would be able to support that, partnerships with other organizations that would be able to provide resources at a lower cost or even free?
I think,
I mean, are those?
I think that's the whole point of the task force that we're going to start after the new year.
Okay,
was to really look at, you know, are there things at the Child Study Center? Are there grants? Are there programs that we can tap into that help with some of this? But I think the goal was to get a group of people together, board members, faculty, school, you know, the team, to say, what are the pressing behavioral issues? What are the issues we see? And then start thinking about resources that we might be able to tap into. Mm-hmm. That was the goal.
Michael, you should be on that committee.
Of course he will be.
We do have a grant that we've had for many years. It's called the Primary Mental Health Grant, and so it's about $20,000. It partially funds one particular position, a teacher assistant who works under the direction of a school psychologist, and also has a variety of different other monies allotted for yoga, family teams. Thank you, family teams. So wraparound services. We do have a relationship with the town human resources, or human services, I should say, and you know, but they're also meeting the needs of the greater community too. So you know, they certainly have worked in tangent with us. If there's any grants you know about out there, please let me know about them. I don't know if there's anything, and I hate to say it, but sometimes if there is something like that, Woodbridge is not the town that usually gets something like that, because we can afford to do that, is what the mentality would be on that.
But
but
I think that's an important discussion, and we definitely are going to start that after the new year.
Yeah.
I want to stay on the budget for this year and figure out.
I also want to say that, you know, I think one of the reasons that a budget has to have some definition of what you're actually going to do and what you're actually signing up for and what you're passing is because there are timelines that start to click along for anybody, a staff member who might be impacted. And so both in fairness and also in protocol. And so, you know, I just say that from the perspective of it can't just be left till July 1st, like, what are we going to do? Right. I mean, it's just, you know, it doesn't work that way. So.
Other questions?
I had one other question. You know, as we're getting down to the really granular level detail of everything, so 80% of the budget is in the staffing cost. What explains, how is the year-to-year change calculated? As far as increases for salaries?
Al, do you mind?
So in large part, our labor is driven by collective bargaining agreements. So we, thank you, we project where the members will advance based on the salary grids within the collective bargaining agreements. For new hires, we make a somewhat of a risky bet, and we assume that they will be brought in at, generally an entry level or no higher than a master's level fifth step. Obviously, that has a little bit of risk inherently because it depends on what the labor market is out there and what the absolute optimum candidate ends up coming to us with credentials of. So hopefully that's answered your questions. In large part, it's contractually driven, so it's not that we're taking a nebulous guess. We're really budgeting for specific people currently that hold specific positions.
And is everybody is in the same agreement pool, or no?
No. Certified staff is governed by the Woodbridge Education Association. Non-certified teaching assistants are governed by a separate contract. And lastly, our secretarial, kitchen, and custodial staff are governed by yet another contract. And you'll recall in Bob's presentation, he had mentioned that traditionally we offer retirement incentives to the teachers to one collective bargaining group. This year we expanded that offering out to our non-certified staff as well, including teacher assistants and the members of the custodial, secretarial, and kitchen as well.
Is the admin under the same contractual setup as
And last but not least, some of the administrators are represented under a collective bargaining agreement. Superintendent and myself are not.
And so where do those numbers come from then?
Contract.
Excuse me, those are actually
That's
an
contracts
example
as
of.
well.
That's
it's just
in the
not a
individual contract,
Yes.
it's not separate, okay.
Correct. Can I also just add, so on the subject of salary and benefits, we've also, excuse me, made an assumption that based on current trends with our healthcare provider, our claims renewal will come in at 7.5%, which is conservative compared to prior years. So similarly, could there be budgetary savings after tonight? There could also be factors going the other way that could create a problem.
Other questions? So the motion is to approve the superintendent's budget as presented.
That's the .76.
Correct.
I actually want to bring up another question.
Yeah.
Because part of what I think Michael was saying as well, and many people have been saying, is this doesn't make sense from an educational perspective to pretend that we can be at 0% or 0.76% year to year. And we're choosing to accept ownership of that instead of pushing back against Woodbridge to say, you need to actually budget.
Serendipitously, it does
Well,
make
so-
sense this year.
I mean,
Not
theoretically, again, I don't want to be the one that carves out special ed in any way, but theoretically, this is not a 0.76% budget for the regular education program, right? I mean, we have significant sort of budget increases that are sort of offset by a savings in special ed, sort of serendipitous
Did the math once and it
things.
was like 4.3. The real increase is 4.3. If you deduct out that special ed serendipity.
So, and if you remember, last year we did go to the town with a budget that was what we felt was the right number for education, and the town came back and made some changes to it. And I think most people feel, I mean, and I could be wrong at the finance committee, that this budget reflects the town's desire for us not to increase a lot, but it doesn't really pull away from the educational program that we're providing to the kids. It still makes hard decisions that the town has sort of asked us, but the town asked us for 0, and I think what we at finance felt was that we need to ask for what we think the number needs to be, and I think that's where we came in at at finance.
Next year, we won't be at 0.
Next year, we're going to have a problem.
We're going to have a big problem.
If they say 0. I mean, I think it's not reasonable for a town to think that an education budget can be 0 every year.
we know one of the reasons a lot of people move to Woodbridge.
Yeah.
Is the
Is for the
education,
school.
right.
This feels like something that
Yeah.
voters need to
Right.
be.
Yeah.
But if you talk to the town, they will say that the majority of people who live in Woodbridge do not have kids in the school. So there's a balancing of, those. I'm with you. I mean, I moved here for a school and
Yeah.
sent 4 kids through it, and so, which is why I'm.
Wait, is that true? A majority of the residents don't have kids?
Absolutely.
Never have had kids? Go
Not
through
never
this?
have, but they don't have
Just
currently.
They don't
current.
currently
But
have.
as from a taxpayer
Okay.
base, the bulk of the people in the town right now do not have kids in the school system.
Demographically today, that,
Yeah.
yeah.
And, in general, for all time, I mean, it's.
It's a question of what percentage of people in Woodbridge actually vote in Woodbridge elections. What
Have kids.
percentage feel very strongly about the quality of the education that we're able to provide for our kids and might act more vocally if it was brought to their attention.
So if you.
So that's what we sort of went with last year, and we didn't get nearly the turnout at the town budget meeting that we kind of had hoped for. We did get a lot of teachers, and I thank all the teachers who came and spoke in support of the budget. But in terms of the parent community, unfortunately, I'm not sure that there were a lot of people who felt strongly about engaging, and we did make efforts at most meetings to tell people to come out in support of the budget.
I think whatever one thinks the right number is, that might be in this budget, there seemed to be a different feel to the meeting last year that hasn't been felt in a while. And so, not only the turnout, but also just some of the commentary by others beyond those who are supporting education. So I think there's some kind of a balancing act here, and I don't know if you understand what I'm saying, but sometimes if you ask for too much, it may. And listen, last year we asked for 5.77, and we ended up with, and that's I thought we ended up with 3.61, which was one of the highest increases we've ever received. But it didn't come without some pain in the process because we were the only game in town that actually got an increase. The rest of the departments came up with a collective, pretty much no increase, in order to make sure. So I
And
think
we sometimes get compared to Amity. Amity only did a 2% increase, but Amity had has had like a 15% student enrollment reduction over the last several years, whereas ours went up. It's not apples to apples, but for many townspeople, it's apples to apples. How can Amity do 1.95 and we needed 3.6? It's not. And no matter how many times we try to compare those items, it doesn't go. Same thing with, there's a certain number of households in the city of Woodbridge, town of Woodbridge, and we have X number of fires. We don't change the number of houses in town, but we have changed the number of students that we are serving in this school, right? And we went from 700 to 848. The services that we're providing here are different than some of the other services that get provided in town. So when you ask for a 0 from the police force, our population hasn't changed one iota. It's fairly constant over the last 10 years. But our individual population has changed drastically, which again is why I think sometimes looking at other town budget line items and saying they can do it at 0, why can't you, is not a fair comparison of the services that we provide that are provided in other places in the town. That's just my commentary.
Agree.
Okay. All those in favor of approving the budget? One, two, three. Any opposed? Abstentions? 2 abstentions, okay.
Failed to raise my hand.
Which one are you raising for?
I'll raise it for approval.
Okay, so,
Jeff is voting for approval?
yes. So 7 approves, no, 6 approves, 2 abstentions. Thank you. I know this is. One absent.
Oh, right.
Okay. I would say let's take a break for a minute, but let's keep going.
we're almost.
Okay,
well,
upcoming meeting presentations. So our next meeting in January, we have a strategic plan update, and then we do the superintendent mid-year evaluation. You want to mention those things?
All right, so.
Had talked about
Hold on, Bob's going to give a little
Oh,
update,
sorry, okay.
Go ahead, Bob.
Well, I was just going to say that in the strategic plan update, I think there's two things that I'd like to just sort of share where I think we are. So I think one is that you would like to know, where are the different things, where are they along the way? And we've heard a number of strategic plan updates over the years. Some of you have, if you've been on the board, and some of you are new to this, but I think it would probably be more of a brief, high-level update as to where we are, what things have we been able to move the needle on, what things, sometimes you just can't get to everything or you haven't started those things yet. But I also like to talk a little bit with the board about how we move forward with this plan, because this plan was crafted when I first arrived after having multiple meetings with all the stakeholders, taking in all of the opinions, thoughts. What are we doing well? What do we need to do better? What are our hopes and dreams? And this was constructed and crafted. It has evolved a little bit, but it was meant to be a 3-year, 2017 to 2020 plan. And so now it's 2020, and so I think I'd like to talk a little bit about the whole aspect of how do we move this into the future for another 3 years. So I think we'll be sharing a little bit about how we might do that.
Okay. A question?
Yeah, at one point, at a couple of meetings ago, there was a request to look into whether multi-source feedback on our leaders was something that we could pursue. 360, it's called different things. So where are we?
I don't think
on
that we can do that mid-year. We have so the
The
contract.
question was whether it could be
Right.
done, because I think there were,
Right.
some people said, I don't know if it can be done. So did we look into that? And
So I can't say that in my surgical hiatus that I had a chance to take a look at that in any great depth. I did have conversations prior to my leaving, so I think it's important to know that, for instance, your building administrators, the people who are members of the WASA, the bargaining unit, they are very, very clearly. Their evaluation is based upon a evaluation plan, which we've reviewed it in the past, maybe not recently, but in the past. It's an approved plan by the board. It's an approved by the state. It's a plan that takes into account goal writing, student achievement, goals on student achievement in the building, observations by myself, so on and so forth. That is the plan that is officially their evaluation. We also have other ancillary aspects, such as survey data. We have survey data that we had last year. We have survey data. We actually have some forms of it even right now with how we're moving the needle through this leadership profile survey that went out.
Can I cut you off for 1 second?
Yes, please do.
I'm going to cut you off.
Yep.
That's not real. Her question is very specific about whether or not we could do 360 evaluations. I don't think we've gotten the answer because Bob was off for the months of November and December. And so I think the question is, we were going to ask Floyd if 360 evaluations are something that can be used within the scope of what the bargaining agreements say, right?
yeah.
Yes.
And I think either way, I think the reason that we didn't push it was nothing can be done during this year because these, in both in his contract as well as the teacher's contract, it's sort of, at the beginning of a school year, we could theoretically make a change. Bob's contract is renewed in the summer, and so if we wanted to add something to the contract, but it says specifically that his evaluation, we set at the beginning of the year, and we stick with that for the year. And so if we wanted to change his evaluation for 360, it would happen when we
Don't we
do
have a
his end of year.
midpoint evaluation? Like, do we have a midpoint
We do.
review? And
That's
January.
what we're talking about.
yeah, correct.
Yeah.
But like, I
But we
think that-
can't do a 360 review mid-year because the mid-year review and that process was established by contract in June or July, or I don't remember when we do that. So we can change it at any point, but it has to be, it
Can
has
you do
to
anything
happen.
you want if you're voluntarily doing it? Like, could one say, yeah, I would love to get a 360 review, and,
Sure.
one could do anything they want.
Correct.
They know that that's what the people that they work with want.
Many executives choose to do 360s to improve their own performance.
Correct.
We also, the exit interview from Gina is something that we've talked about.
Yep.
that isn't tied to anybody's contracts, but was something that we thought would be valuable data.
Right. And Mary was supposed to do that. Did Mary speak with Gina?
Yeah, so those are things I will follow up with, because those things got left at the door when I exited, so.
Do you think that we'll be able to get some kind of feedback prior to the midpoint, or will this be after the midpoint?
Feedback on what?
About what?
On these two items, like on whether or not one would want to voluntarily do a 360 review, and whether or not we will get a feedback from Mary about Gina, prior to our meeting, our midpoint meeting.
So the answer I would say, yes, I'm sure we can get the Gina information by the January meeting. I don't think we'll get a 360 by mid-January. Okay.
I will talk to Floyd tomorrow, and we will work on. I think also he might want to make sure he has the same definition of a 360 that other people have as a definition of a 360. So I will talk to him about that, and that may be information that we can bring to you, if not before, at that January meeting. And the Gina exit interview information, I think we could do that as well. I actually, before I left, I did work on, and it's basically in a draft form, it's an electronic template for doing an exit interview for a staff member. So, because we would want to look at that potentially for not just one person, but for other people as we go forward. Even though we have very little turnover, it's something that I think we would.
It's a great idea.
Want to air that.
Okay. Facilities Committee.
Jeff was not at that meeting. So I'm going to give that report, if that's okay.
Of course.
Facilities Committee met on December 13th. The report that was given to the committee told us that there was the 6-month asbestos surveillance has been completed, that repairs to the fire alarm system have been completed, radon testing was completed, and all the results were passing in the positive sense. That there were several issues with the phone lines that have been resolved, that the fall landscaping cleanup was completed over Thanksgiving break, including tree trimming by the bus drop-off area and removal of some branches on the north playground. During the upcoming winter holiday break, they have the following plans in place: replacement of the reheat valve in the vice principal's office. Woohoo! The mechanical vendor will be on site to complete building-wide air filter changes and do preventative maintenance work. And as this was mentioned in the superintendent's report, USC Solutions is scheduled to complete Phase 2 of the HVAC upgrades in the B and C wings.
And the remainder of this, and also other parts of the building where they, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Any facilities questions? Finance Committee?
We met last Monday, and we talked about it.
You heard all about it.
Curriculum Committee?
Curriculum Committee met on November 21st. We had a very informative presentation on the special education program by Ms. Mammon. And many of the board members were there in attendance, as well as faculty members. The minutes are included in the board packet for this month and on e-meeting. Next meeting will be this coming Thursday, December 19th at 4:30 in the district office. And Ms. Mammon will present an overview of the TAG program at that meeting. That was originally on the November agenda, but our meeting was so rich with conversation and discussion that in the interest of time, we postponed the TAG portion of the presentation until the December meeting, and January will include a presentation on the math curriculum, math enrichment, and differentiation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions for curriculum? Kate, liaison report.
No Nothing, two quick things. One, the legislative area.
Close.
The legislative area breakfast, to be determined, so we don't even know when it is. So that's why I was saying I don't really have much to say about it for our area. One thing I just wanted to point out, I don't know if folks have had a chance, because I know we get tons of stuff to read and look at, but in the policy highlights from December, volume 19, issue 13, the second article in there is about trauma-informed schooling. And I think it's just a quick summary, it's just 2 pages, but it's opening up a conversation that I think is super important, gives some, it references an article that was recently published in Education Week. And it kind of gives a quick, like, these are 10 recommendations for schools to think about. Some of them are no-cost or low-cost thoughts. And so, I mean, I guess just to give a couple examples. So, like, sensitize all adults in the school, nurture long-term secure relationships with students, emphasize belonging and safety, carve out one-on-one time, create safe corners in classrooms, be predictable, attend to nutrition and movement, prompt empathetic verbal interactions, encourage curiosity, and then teach and model social emotional skills. And I know we've been talking about teaching and modeling social emotional skills a lot, but it's good to think about that there are other aspects of nurturing students that can help them. And there's policy implication. This is obviously for policy. They're coming out with a model policy that will be published in January, so we can look at it again at that time. But just something to think about and some food for thought when we're all trying to think about these things. So.
Okay. Public comment. Sorry, Marcia, I know. Okay, motion to adjourn. All those in favor? All right. Thank you.